The pristine corridors of the Galactic Research Station, Harmony gleamed under soft artificial lighting as Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped off the transport shuttle. Her worn duffel bag and simple clothes stood in stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial robes and bioenhancement suits worn by the other new arrivals. She moved with an economy of motion that most observers would mistake for nervousness, but the station's advanced security sensors registered something entirely different. Deep within the station's central computer core, algorithms designed by the galaxy's most brilliant minds began processing the data streaming from thousands of microscopic sensors embedded throughout the facility. Heart rate, pupil dilation, microexpressions, gait analysis, stress hormone levels, all fed into a sophisticated threat assessment matrix that had never once failed to identify dangerous individuals among the station's diverse population. The readings coming from the human female were unlike anything in the system's vast database. "Welcome to Harmony Station," chirped Kickstar, a purple-scaled Zephyrian whose species specialized in diplomatic relations. His natural empathic abilities made him perfect for greeting new arrivals, especially those from primitive worlds. "I'm your orientation coordinator. You must be Dr. Vasquez from... Let me see." He consulted his datapad with practiced efficiency. "Earth. How wonderful. We so rarely get researchers from newly discovered worlds." Elena smiled politely, the expression never quite reaching her dark eyes. "Thank you. I'm honored to be here." The warmth in her voice was genuine, but Kickstar's sensitive empathic receptors detected something beneath the surface, a controlled alertness that reminded him uncomfortably of apex predators he'd studied on various death worlds. He quickly dismissed the thought. Humans were classified as a peaceful species from a garden world. Their own reports described Earth as a paradise of blue oceans and green continents. Meanwhile, the security AI continued its analysis. Elena's resting heart rate was remarkably low for someone in an unfamiliar environment. Her breathing patterns suggested exceptional cardiovascular conditioning. Most telling were the micro-movements of her eyes, a constant, subtle scanning pattern that cataloged exits, potential weapons, cover positions, and the relative threat levels of everyone in her vicinity. The AI flagged her file with a notation that would have alarmed any security officer who bothered to read it. Subject displays behavioral patterns consistent with elite military conditioning. Recommend enhanced monitoring. But no one was watching the AI's assessments. Harmony Station prided itself on being a beacon of peace and cooperation. Violence was so rare that most staff members wouldn't recognize a threat assessment alert if it appeared on their screens in flashing red letters. As Kickstar led Elena through the orientation process, other station residents paused to stare. Humans were still a novelty. Their species had only been contacted 3 standard galactic years ago, and Elena was just the 4th human to visit the station. Her appearance fascinated them. Unlike the heavily modified species that made up most of the galactic community, humans looked remarkably natural. No bioenhancements, no technological augmentations, no obvious specializations for their environment. Dr. Vexnari, a tall, willowy Etherian whose translucent skin revealed the gentle pulse of bioluminescent organs beneath, approached with academic curiosity. "Fascinating," she murmured to her companion, Dr. Thun, whose crab-like shell housed one of the galaxy's finest analytical minds. Such an unmodified physique. Their world must be incredibly benign for them to have evolved with so little specialization. Dr. Thun's multiple eye stalks swiveled to study Elena more closely. Indeed, look at the bone density readings from the medical scanner. Quite dense for a species from a low-gravity world. And those muscle fiber compositions most unusual for herbivores. Neither researcher noticed how Elena's head turned slightly at their whispered conversation, or how her expression tightened almost imperceptibly when she was referred to as an herbivore. The security AI, however, recorded the subtle tension in her jaw muscles and the way her hands unconsciously shifted to positions that would allow for rapid defensive movements. The tour continued through Harmony's magnificent research facilities. The station was truly a marvel of cooperative engineering, a massive ring-shaped structure that rotated to provide artificial gravity for the comfort of species from higher gravity worlds. Multiple biomes had been carefully constructed to accommodate researchers from dozens of different worlds, from the crystal caves preferred by the silicon-based lithoids to the ammonia pools required by the gas giant dwellers. "Your quarters are in Section 7, Kickstar explained as they walked through a corridor lined with transparent, aluminum windows offering spectacular views of the nearby nebula. It's been modified to replicate Earth's atmospheric composition as closely as possible. We weren't entirely certain about the oxygen percentage, so we erred on the side of caution and kept it a bit lower than what your preliminary report suggested." "That's very thoughtful," Elena replied, though she privately wondered if they'd actually made the atmosphere too rich rather than too thin. Her homeworld's actual atmospheric composition was something humanity had decided to keep to themselves during first contact negotiations. As they passed through the central hub, Elena observed the social dynamics with the same analytical eye she'd once used to assess battlefield conditions. The various species mingled freely, their interactions marked by the careful politeness of beings who had never known true conflict. She watched a group of young researchers from different worlds sharing what appeared to be recreational activities, games of strategy that seemed almost quaint in their simplicity. "We have researchers here from 47 different worlds," Kickstar continued proudly. "Harmony Station represents the greatest cooperative scientific endeavor in galactic history. Here, we study everything from quantum mechanics to xenobiology, all in the spirit of peaceful advancement." The phrase peaceful advancement would have been redundant in the galactic community. All advancement was peaceful. War had been virtually eliminated from civilized space for over 1,000 years. The few remaining conflicts were minor trade disputes resolved through economic sanctions or diplomatic negotiations. The galaxy had evolved beyond the need for violence. Elena nodded appreciatively while mentally noting the locations of what appeared to be emergency stations, the probable security checkpoints, laughably minimal, and the response time it would take to reach different sections of the station in an emergency. Old habits died hard. Their final stop was the laboratory complex where Elena would be conducting her research. Her official specialty was listed as comparative evolutionary biology with focus on adaptation mechanisms, a field of study that would allow her to examine how different species had evolved to survive in their respective environments. What the station's administrators didn't know was that Elena's real expertise lay in a much more specific area: the evolution of predatory and survival adaptations. Dr. Chantel, the Zeridian laboratory supervisor, greeted Elena with enthusiasm that made her light blue skin glow even brighter. "Dr. Vasquez, such an honor to have you here. Your preliminary papers on human evolutionary adaptations were absolutely fascinating. Though I must admit, we found some of the claims difficult to believe." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Oh, which claims were those?" "Well, the assertion that humans evolved from pursuit predators, for instance, and the claims about your species' capacity for violence and warfare. Surely those were metaphorical descriptions? Your world's preliminary reports describe Earth as a peaceful garden world." Elena's smile didn't waver, but the security sensors detected a spike in stress hormones that the AI flagged as significant. "Perhaps some of our academic papers were poorly translated," she said diplomatically. "I'm hoping my research here will help clarify some of those misunderstandings." As Elena was shown to her assigned laboratory space, she began to understand the magnitude of the misconceptions surrounding her species. The galactic community had apparently received heavily sanitized reports about Earth during first contact. While technically accurate, Earth was indeed a world of blue oceans and green continents. The reports had somehow failed to mention the planet's extraordinarily high gravity, its volatile weather systems, its active geology, or the fact that nearly every life form on the planet had evolved in a constant state of predator-prey relationships. More importantly, they had no idea that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to survive on a world that actively tried to kill them on a daily basis. The laboratory was impressive by any standard. Advanced equipment from dozens of different worlds had been integrated into a seamless research environment. Quantum microscopes sat next to bioscanners, while holographic projection systems could display complex molecular structures in three-dimensional detail. Elena recognized some of the technology, but much of it was beyond anything Earth had yet developed. Your first assignment, Dr. Chantel continued, will be to conduct a comparative analysis of stress responses across different species. We're particularly interested in how various evolutionary pressures have shaped survival mechanisms. It's purely theoretical work, of course. None of our species have faced genuine survival pressures for millennia. Elena nodded thoughtfully while examining a bioscanner that could apparently analyze living tissue down to the cellular level. That sounds like fascinating work. I'd love to contribute some data from my own species for comparison. Wonderful. Though I suspect human stress responses will be quite mild compared to species from more challenging worlds. Garden world species typically show very limited adaptation for crisis situations. If Elena had been drinking something, she might have choked. Instead, she simply smiled and made a mental note to be very careful about which biological sample she provided for analysis. As the day progressed, Elena met more of her new colleagues. Each interaction reinforced her growing understanding of just how sheltered and peaceful this galactic community truly was. Dr. Mordin, a bear-like Ursoid from a high-gravity world, was considered the tough member of the research team because his planet had seasonal weather variations. Dr. Cleese, whose insectoid species had evolved from hive-minded creatures, was regarded as unusually aggressive because her people had once competed for food resources. None of them had any frame of reference for the kind of world Elena called home. The security AI continued its silent monitoring throughout the day, accumulating data that painted an increasingly anomalous picture. Elena's reaction times were faster than any previously recorded for a garden world species. Her spatial awareness was off the charts. Most tellingly, her physiological responses to potential threats were not those of a creature that had evolved in safety. When a maintenance drone malfunctioned and fell from the ceiling, Elena was already moving to avoid it before the sound of breaking components had fully registered with anyone else in the room. Dr. Thun, who witnessed the incident, made a note to review the gravity specifications for Earth. Surely creatures from a low-gravity world shouldn't be able to move with such explosive speed. That evening, Elena stood in her quarters looking out at the nebula through her window. The view was breathtaking, swirling clouds of gas and dust painted in shades of purple and gold, with new stars being born in brilliant bursts of light. It was beautiful and peaceful and utterly unlike anything she could have seen from Earth. She thought about home, where even the most peaceful moments carried an undercurrent of danger, where the weather could kill you, the animals could kill you, the plants could kill you, and sometimes the ground itself could kill you, where humans had learned to live by being smarter, faster, tougher, and more adaptable than everything else on a planet that never stopped trying to eliminate them. Elena activated her personal communicator and began composing her first report back to Earth. She kept it brief and factual, but the implications were clear. The galactic community was advanced, peaceful, and completely unprepared for the reality of human nature. They had welcomed her as a representative of a harmless garden world species, having no idea they had just invited an apex predator into their pristine research facility. The irony wasn't lost on her. They thought they were studying her. In reality, she was studying them, learning their weaknesses, understanding their vulnerabilities, mapping their capabilities. Not out of malice, but because it was impossible for her to do otherwise. Constant threat assessment was as natural to her as breathing. As she prepared for sleep, Elena reflected on the ethical implications of her situation. These beings were genuinely peaceful, genuinely kind, and genuinely welcoming. They deserved to know the truth about what humans really were. But she also understood why Earth government had chosen to present a carefully sanitized version of humanity during first contact. The galaxy wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. The security AI filed its daily report in a routine database that no one bothered to read. The report noted that the new human researcher displayed behavioral anomalies consistent with extreme survival conditioning and recommended enhanced monitoring. It also flagged several physiological readings that didn't match the expected parameters for garden world species. The AI's warnings went unnoticed, lost in the massive data streams that flowed through Harmony Station's computer systems. But the warnings remained, accumulating like evidence in a case that no one yet knew they needed to solve. Because Elena Vasquez wasn't just a researcher from Earth. She was a former member of Earth's most elite military unit, a soldier who had volunteered for this mission specifically because her psychological profile indicated she could maintain her cover while gathering intelligence about humanity's new galactic neighbors. And despite her genuine appreciation for their hospitality and her growing fondness for her colleagues, Elena never forgot that her true mission was to determine whether these peaceful beings could ever pose a threat to humanity, or whether humanity would someday pose a threat to them. The galaxy had welcomed a human researcher. They had no idea they were hosting a human weapon, and their sensors were the only things that suspected the truth. 3 weeks into her assignment, Elena had settled into what appeared to be a comfortable routine. Her colleagues had warmed to her presence, impressed by her methodical approach to research and her uncanny ability to spot patterns in complex data sets. What they didn't realize was that pattern recognition was a survival skill on Elena's homeworld. The ability to quickly identify threats, opportunities, and escape routes could mean the difference between life and death. Dr. Chantel had become particularly fond of Elena's work on stress response mechanisms. "Your insights into survival adaptations are remarkable," she commented one morning as they reviewed Elena's latest findings. "Though I must say, some of your hypotheses seem rather dramatic. This suggestion that extreme environmental pressures could produce rapid evolutionary changes. It's almost as if you've witnessed such adaptations firsthand." Elena carefully maintained her expression while adjusting the bioscanner settings. "I suppose I have a good imagination for worst-case scenarios." The truth was that Elena had indeed witnessed such adaptations firsthand, because humans were still actively evolving to survive on their killer world. Elena herself carried genetic modifications that had become common in Earth's military units. Enhanced reflexes, improved oxygen processing, increased bone density, and accelerated healing factors. These weren't technological augmentations like other species used, but actual genetic improvements that could be passed on to offspring. The galaxy had no idea that humans were still actively at war with their own planet. As Elena worked, the station's security AI continued its relentless monitoring. The anomalous readings had only grown more pronounced over the past 3 weeks. Elena's cardiovascular efficiency was impossible for a garden world species. Her reaction times suggested neural pathways that could only develop under constant threat conditions. Most disturbing of all, her sleep patterns indicated someone who had trained themselves to wake instantly at the first sign of danger. The AI had begun cross-referencing Elena's biological data with its extensive database of known species. No garden world creature had ever displayed such adaptations. Even species from moderately challenging worlds showed nothing like Elena's physiological optimization for survival and combat. But the AI's growing concerns continued to go unnoticed by the station's staff. The daily security briefings were perfunctory affairs that rarely addressed anything more serious than minor equipment malfunctions or diplomatic protocol violations. Violence was so foreign to their experience that they literally couldn't recognize the signs of it being shaped by it. Elena's first real test came during what should have been a routine emergency drill. She was in the central laboratory when the alarm sounded, a gentle, melodious tone that was supposed to indicate a simulated fire in Section 12. The drill was designed to test evacuation procedures and emergency response coordination. Elena watched her colleagues with professional interest as they calmly began filing toward the designated emergency stations. The evacuation was proceeding exactly according to protocol when the real emergency began. A massive asteroid fragment, somehow missed by the station's early warning systems, struck the outer ring with devastating force. The impact sent shockwaves through the entire structure, causing artificial gravity to fluctuate wildly and emergency lighting to strobe in chaotic patterns. What had started as a simple fire drill suddenly became a genuine crisis. Elena's colleagues reacted with the stunned confusion of beings who had never faced actual danger. Dr. Chantel stood frozen, her blue skin flickering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated extreme distress. Dr. Thun's multiple eye stalks swiveled frantically as he tried to process what was happening. Even Kickstar, trained in crisis management, seemed paralyzed by the transition from simulation to reality. Elena moved without conscious thought. In the 3 seconds it took her colleagues to realize they were in actual danger, Elena had already assessed the situation, identified the primary threats, and begun implementing survival protocols. The asteroid impact had compromised the station's structural integrity. She could feel the subtle vibrations that indicated ongoing hull breaches. Emergency systems were failing in cascade patterns that would overwhelm the backup power grid within minutes. Most critically, the evacuation routes they had been following were now blocked by debris and decompression zones. The primary evacuation route is compromised, Elena announced with calm authority, her voice cutting through the growing chaos. We need to reach Emergency Station 7 through the maintenance corridors. Dr. Chantel stared at her in bewilderment. But the protocols assume normal emergency conditions, Elena interrupted, already moving toward a maintenance access panel that most of the station's residents didn't even know existed. Right now, following standard protocols will get us killed. The security AI, monitoring Elena's biometrics during the crisis, recorded readings that defied all known parameters for Garden World species. Her stress hormones remained remarkably stable despite the life-threatening situation. Her heart rate actually decreased as the danger increased, indicating a level of crisis conditioning that the AI had never encountered. Most impossibly, her brain activity patterns showed the characteristics of someone who was not just managing the emergency, but actually thriving in it. Elena forced open the maintenance panel with casual efficiency, revealing a narrow corridor that led toward the station's central core. "This way," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. Dr. Thun's analytical mind finally engaged. "That's a maintenance shaft. It's not rated for personnel transit during emergency conditions. It's rated for atmospheric pressure and has independent life support," Elena replied without pausing. "More importantly, it's not currently being depressurized by hull breaches." She disappeared into the corridor before anyone could object further. After a moment of paralyzed hesitation, her colleagues followed, driven by the sudden realization that the gentle human researcher somehow knew more about emergency survival than their own crisis management specialists. The maintenance corridor was cramped and poorly lit, designed for robotic repair units rather than organic beings. Elena navigated it with the confidence of someone reading a familiar map, somehow knowing which branches to take and which areas to avoid. Her colleagues struggled to keep up, their different physiologies making the tight spaces even more challenging. "How do you know where you're going?" Dr. Chantel gasped as they crawled through a particularly narrow section. Elena paused at a junction, checking her mental map of the station's infrastructure. "I've studied the technical specifications," she replied, which was true but hardly the complete truth. What she didn't mention was that memorizing emergency escape routes was standard procedure for anyone in her former profession. They had been moving for 15 minutes when they encountered their first serious obstacle. A massive piece of debris had punctured the corridor ahead, creating a partial vacuum that was steadily drawing atmosphere out of their section. The other researchers stopped, clearly assuming they would have to turn back. Elena studied the breach with professional interest. The hole was approximately 2 meters in diameter, too large to easily seal, but small enough that they could potentially navigate around it. The atmospheric loss was significant, but not immediately fatal. More concerning was the structural damage. The impact had weakened the surrounding support framework, and the entire section was at risk of collapse. "We can get past it," Elena announced, already beginning to remove her jacket. "Are you insane?" Dr. Thun's eye stalks swiveled in agitation. "The decompression alone could kill us." Elena wrapped her jacket around her head and shoulders, creating an improvised pressure seal. "The pressure differential isn't severe enough to cause immediate death. We'll have approximately 90 seconds of useful consciousness if we move quickly." Before anyone could stop her, Elena squeezed through the gap in the debris field, moving with liquid efficiency that suggested extensive training in zero-atmosphere operations. She disappeared into the darkness beyond, leaving her colleagues staring in shock at the empty space where she had been. 30 seconds later, her voice came through their communicators. "All clear on this side. The corridor is intact for at least 50 meters. Who's coming next?" One by one, following Elena's instructions, the research team made it through the breach. Each crossing was terrifying for beings who had never experienced atmospheric decompression, but Elena's calm guidance and precise timing made it possible. Dr. Clese, whose insectoid physiology made her particularly vulnerable to pressure changes, was the last to cross. As Elena helped her through the gap, the Zeridian asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Where did you learn to do this?" Elena's answer was carefully neutral. "Earth has some challenging environments. We learned to adapt." The security AI, analyzing the rescue operation through the station's internal monitoring systems, flagged Elena's performance for immediate review. Her knowledge of station infrastructure exceeded that of most engineering personnel. Her crisis management skills were at the level of elite emergency responders. Most significantly, her physiological responses during life-threatening situations indicated training and conditioning that no Garden World species should possess. The AI began running probability analyses. The chances of a Garden World researcher randomly possessing such specialized survival skills were approaching zero. Either Elena Vasquez was a statistical impossibility, or the information about her world of origin was fundamentally incorrect. For the first time in its operational history, the station's security AI began to suspect that it might be dealing with a deliberate deception. Elena led her group through 3 more kilometers of maintenance corridors, bypassing damaged sections and avoiding areas where radiation leaks from the damaged power grid posed a threat. She moved with the confidence of someone who had trained for exactly this type of scenario, making decisions that kept them ahead of the expanding catastrophe zone. When they finally reached Emergency Station 7, they found chaos. The impact had overwhelmed the station's emergency response capabilities, and rescue teams were struggling to coordinate evacuation efforts across multiple crisis zones. Elena's group was among the first to reach the central hub under their own power, and their arrival drew immediate attention from the emergency coordinators. Commander Zoltar, a massive Chronari whose species specialized in emergency management, approached Elena with obvious confusion. His people had evolved on a world of constant seismic activity and were considered the galaxy's experts in disaster response. Yet this small human had somehow navigated crisis conditions that had defeated his own teams. "Dr. Vasquez," he rumbled, his granite-like features showing deep perplexity. "My sensors indicate you led your group through Section 12 during active decompression. That should have been impossible for your species." Elena met his gaze steadily. Sometimes impossibility is just another obstacle to overcome. The Chronari commander studied her with new respect. His people prided themselves on their ability to function during planetary emergencies, but Elena's performance suggested capabilities that exceeded even Chronari standards. "Your world's emergency training must be exceptionally comprehensive." "You could say that," Elena agreed. Over the following hours, as rescue operations continued throughout the station, Elena found herself repeatedly pressed into service by the emergency teams. Her ability to assess structural damage, navigate compromised areas, and coordinate rescue efforts made her invaluable. She helped locate trapped researchers, guided repair teams to critical system failures, and somehow managed to predict which areas of the station were likely to fail next. Dr. Chantel, watching Elena coordinate a particularly complex rescue operation, made a disturbing realization. She's not just helping with the emergency, she whispered to Dr. Thun. She's actually better at this than our emergency specialists. Dr. Thun's analytical mind had reached the same conclusion. Her performance patterns suggest extensive crisis training. But garden world species don't develop such capabilities. It's evolutionarily impossible. The security AI, monitoring their conversation, noted their growing suspicions with algorithmic interest. The biological and behavioral data it had collected over the past 3 weeks painted a clear picture. Elena Vasquez was not what she appeared to be. Her world was not what it appeared to be. And humanity might not be what the galaxy believed it to be. As the immediate crisis began to wind down, Elena found herself standing in the central hub, surrounded by grateful colleagues and emergency personnel. They looked at her with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment, clearly struggling to reconcile her apparent capabilities with their understanding of her species. Commander Zoltar approached her one final time. Dr. Vasquez, I've seen disaster response specialists from 40 different worlds. Your performance today exceeded all of them. I find myself curious about the training programs on your homeworld. Elena considered her response carefully. The truth was that every human child learned basic disaster survival before they learned to read, because Earth's weather patterns could turn deadly without warning. Every human adult received mandatory crisis training because volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and severe storms were regular occurrences. And every member of Earth's military learned advanced emergency response because their planet tried to kill them on a daily basis. But the galaxy wasn't ready for that truth. Earth has taught us to be prepared for anything, she said finally. As the station slowly returned to normal operations over the following days, Elena's colleagues began to view her differently. The gentle researcher from the peaceful garden world had revealed capabilities that challenged everything they thought they knew about human limitations. Questions were asked, theories were proposed, and slowly, inevitably, the truth began to emerge. The security AI compiled its findings into a comprehensive report that finally caught the attention of station security. The report's conclusions were stark. Elena Vasquez possessed capabilities consistent with elite military conditioning from a high-threat environment. Her physiological adaptations suggested evolution under extreme survival pressures. Her behavior patterns indicated extensive training in combat and emergency operations. Most significantly, her performance during the crisis had demonstrated knowledge and skills that no garden world species should possess. Station security began their investigation just as Elena was receiving a priority communication from Earth. Her mission parameters were about to change dramatically. The asteroid impact had been detected by long-range sensors throughout the sector, and other species were beginning to ask questions about the remarkable survival capabilities demonstrated by the human researcher. Elena's careful facade was beginning to crack, and the galaxy was starting to suspect that humanity might be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The sensors had been right all along. They just hadn't known what they were detecting until it was too late to maintain the deception. And Elena was about to learn that keeping secrets in a galaxy full of advanced civilizations was far more challenging than surviving on a world that actively tried to kill her. The investigation began quietly, as most dangerous things do. Station Security Chief Vexlar was a methodical being whose crystalline structure allowed him to process multiple data streams simultaneously. When the security AI's report finally reached his attention 3 days after the asteroid incident, he experienced something his species rarely felt: genuine alarm. The report was comprehensive and damning. Elena Vasquez exhibited physiological markers that were impossible for a garden world species. Her reaction times, bone density, cardiovascular efficiency, and neural processing speeds were all beyond the established parameters for peaceful evolution. More troubling still were the behavioral analyses. movement patterns that suggested combat training, situational awareness that indicated threat conditioning, and crisis management capabilities that exceeded those of species specifically evolved for emergency response. Vexlar's crystalline form shifted through several warning colors as he processed the implications. Either their sensors were malfunctioning on a massive scale, or humanity had deliberately misrepresented themselves during first contact. The security chief initiated a discreet investigation, careful not to alert Elena to the growing scrutiny. Additional sensors were deployed throughout her quarters and work areas. Her communications were monitored. Most significantly, her biological samples from the ongoing research project were subjected to detailed analysis by the station's most advanced laboratory equipment. Elena, meanwhile, had received new orders from Earth that complicated her situation considerably. The priority communication had arrived encoded in what appeared to be routine scientific data from her home institution. To anyone monitoring her communications, it looked like updates on Earth's ongoing research projects. In reality, it contained instructions that made Elena's blood run cold. Earth's intelligence services had detected increased scrutiny of human activities throughout the galaxy. Other species were beginning to ask pointed questions about human capabilities, particularly in light of reports about Elena's performance during the emergency. Worse, preliminary analysis suggested that some galactic powers were starting to view humanity as a potential threat rather than a peaceful newcomer. Elena's new mission was clear: maintain her cover at all costs, gather intelligence on potential threats to Earth, and prepare contingency plans for rapid evacuation if her true nature was discovered. She was also instructed to begin subtle assessments of the station's defensive capabilities and the combat potential of the various species she encountered. The irony wasn't lost on her. Earth was worried about being perceived as dangerous, so they were ordering their operative to engage in exactly the kind of intelligence gathering that would confirm those fears if discovered. Elena approached her expanded mission with professional efficiency, but she couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Her colleagues had been kind to her, welcoming her into their community with genuine warmth. The thought of potentially having to neutralize them if her cover was blown left her feeling sick in a way that facing enemy soldiers never had. Dr. Chantel had become particularly close to Elena, often seeking her out for conversations about their respective worlds and research interests. The Zeridian's bioluminescent patterns had grown brighter whenever Elena was around, which Elena had learned indicated affection and trust among her species. "I've been thinking about your research proposals," Chantel said one morning as they shared what passed for breakfast in the station's multi-species cafeteria. "Your insights into survival adaptations are remarkable. Sometimes I feel like you understand survival pressures better than species that actually evolved under challenging conditions." Elena carefully maintained her expression while analyzing the statement for hidden meanings. Was Chantel fishing for information, or was this innocent academic curiosity? "I suppose I have a talent for putting myself in other beings' situations," she replied diplomatically. Chantel's skin flickered with patterns that Elena had learned indicated puzzlement. "It's more than that, though. Yesterday, when that equipment malfunction caused the power fluctuation, you reacted before the safety systems even registered the problem. How did you know there was danger before the sensors detected it?" The question was innocent enough, but Elena felt the weight of increasing scrutiny. She had indeed reacted to the power fluctuation before the automated systems, but only because her enhanced hearing had detected the subtle acoustic signature of failing electrical components. Her genetic modifications allowed her to perceive threats that normal humans couldn't detect, much less other species. "Lucky instincts, I suppose," Elena said with a carefully casual shrug. That same morning, Vexlar received the preliminary results from Elena's biological analyses. The security chief's crystalline form shifted through several spectrums of light as he processed information that challenged everything the galaxy thought they knew about human evolution. Elena's DNA showed clear signs of recent genetic modification, not the crude technological augmentations that some species used, but sophisticated biological improvements that had been integrated at the cellular level. Her muscle fibers contained proteins that shouldn't exist in nature. Her nervous system showed enhancement patterns that would take millions of years to evolve naturally. Most significantly, her bone marrow produced blood cells that were optimized for high-stress environments in ways that suggested deliberate engineering. But the modifications weren't crude or obvious. They appeared to be the result of advanced genetic science applied over multiple generations, creating improvements that were technically natural but impossibly refined for a species that claimed to have only recently achieved spaceflight. Vexlar initiated a priority communication with the Galactic Council's Intelligence Division. The implications were staggering. If humans were genetically modified for combat and survival, Earth might be far more advanced than they had claimed during first contact. Worse, if they had deliberately concealed their true capabilities, it suggested a level of strategic deception that made them a potential threat to galactic security. Elena sensed the changing atmosphere on the station through subtle shifts in her colleagues' behavior. Conversations grew quieter when she approached. Casual invitations to social gatherings became less frequent. Most tellingly, she noticed increased security presence in areas where she worked. She adapted by becoming even more careful about her behavior, consciously suppressing her natural reactions and forcing herself to move with the slower, less efficient patterns that other species expected from Garden World dwellers. But the damage was already done. Her performance during the emergency had revealed capabilities that couldn't be explained away by lucky instincts or exceptional training. The crisis came to a head during what should have been a routine research expedition. Dr. Chantel had proposed a joint study of the asteroid impact site, wanting to examine how the station's various life support systems had responded to the structural damage. Elena agreed to participate, seeing it as an opportunity to gather intelligence on the station's defensive capabilities while maintaining her cover as a dedicated researcher. The expedition team included Elena, Chantel, Dr. Thun, and 2 security officers whose presence was supposedly standard protocol for extravehicular activities. Elena recognized the security detail for what it really was: surveillance designed to monitor her behavior in a controlled environment. The damaged section of the station was a twisted maze of broken corridors and emergency repairs. As they moved through the wreckage, Elena found herself constantly fighting her instincts. Every tactical sense she possessed screamed warnings about ambush points and structural weaknesses, but she forced herself to act like a civilian researcher examining interesting scientific phenomena. The pretense became impossible to maintain when they encountered actual danger. A section of damaged hull plating, weakened by the asteroid impact and subsequent repair work, chose that moment to fail catastrophically. The sudden decompression created a violent wind that swept DR. Thun toward a jagged breach in the station's outer wall. The crab-like being's heavy shell made him unable to resist the atmospheric flow, and he was seconds away from being pulled into the vacuum of space. Elena moved without thinking. In a single fluid motion, she launched herself across 15 meters of twisted wreckage, caught Dr. Thun's failing appendages, and anchored herself to a structural beam with strength that should have been impossible for her body mass. The entire rescue took less than 3 seconds and required a level of speed, coordination, and spatial awareness that no Garden World species could possibly possess. The security officers stared in shock as Elena hauled Dr. Thun to safety with casual efficiency. Her movements had been precise, economical, and devastatingly effective. More importantly, they had been the actions of someone with extensive zero-gravity combat training. Impossible, breathed Officer Krendar, whose species had evolved specifically for space-based operations. No Garden World dweller could have made that rescue. Elena realized her cover was blown, but maintained the pretense anyway. Adrenaline makes you stronger than you think, she said, though she knew the excuse wouldn't hold up to scrutiny. Dr. Chantel's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to colors that Elena had never seen before, deep purples and reds that indicated fear and confusion. Elena, she said quietly, your body just withstood forces that should have torn you apart. How is that possible? Before Elena could formulate an answer, Officer Krindar activated his communicator. Security Chief Vexlar, we have a situation. The human subject has just demonstrated capabilities consistent with advanced combat modification. Recommend immediate containment protocols. Elena felt a familiar calm descend over her as the situation shifted from covert to overt. Her mission parameters had just changed from intelligence gathering to survival. She assessed her tactical situation with professional detachment. 2 security officers with unknown capabilities, 2 civilian researchers who posed no immediate threat, and herself with limited equipment in a compromised environment. Her enhanced hearing detected the subtle whir of approaching security drones through the station's damaged corridors. Her modified olfactory system identified the chemical signatures of at least 6 different species converging on their location. Most significantly, her tactical analysis indicated that the routine research expedition had been an elaborate setup designed to expose her true capabilities. They had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. Dr. Vasquez, Officer Krindar, said carefully, his hand moving to what Elena recognized as a non-lethal restraint weapon. I'm going to need you to accompany us to a secure area for some additional questions. Elena considered her options. She could comply and hope that Earth's diplomatic corps could negotiate her release. She could attempt to escape and probably succeed, but doing so would confirm every suspicion about humanity's true nature. Or she could try something that no one would expect from a supposedly peaceful garden world species. She could tell them the truth. Officer Krindar, Elena said calmly, before you do something that we'll both regret, I think you need to understand what you're really dealing with. The security officer's weapon remained trained on her, but Elena could see uncertainty in his posture. You're dealing with someone from Earth, and Earth isn't the peaceful garden world you think it is. Dr. Chantel's bioluminescent patterns shifted to confused spirals. What do you mean? Elena took a careful breath, knowing that her next words would change everything. I mean that my world is what you would classify as a Class X death world. Everything on Earth, the weather, the geography, the plants, the animals, and especially the dominant species, evolved under conditions that you can't imagine. We didn't lie to you during first contact. We just didn't tell you the whole truth because we knew you weren't ready to hear it. Officer Krendar's weapon wavered slightly. That's impossible. Garden world species can't evolve the capabilities you've demonstrated. You're right, Elena agreed. Garden world species can't, but death world species can. She gestured to the twisted wreckage around them. This damage that you consider catastrophic? On Earth, we call this Tuesday. The asteroid impact that crippled your station? My homeworld gets hit by objects that size every few months. The emergency conditions that overwhelmed your response teams? Those are normal environmental hazards where I come from. Dr. Thun, still recovering from his near-death experience, spoke up with typical analytical precision. The genetic modifications we detected in your samples aren't modifications, Elena interrupted. They're natural evolution compressed into a few thousand years because anything that couldn't adapt, that quickly died. My people aren't genetically enhanced. We're genetically optimized for survival on a planet that actively tries to kill everything on it. The security drones had arrived, their sensors trained on Elena from multiple angles. Through her communicator, she could hear Security Chief Vexlar coordinating a full containment operation. In minutes, she would be surrounded by enough firepower to handle what they thought was a rogue operative. Elena made her choice. Chief Vexlar, she said, addressing the security chief directly through the open communication channel. I'm willing to cooperate fully and answer any questions you have. But first, I think you need to contact the Galactic Council and inform them that humanity requires immediate reclassification. We're not the peaceful garden world species you think we are. We're apex predators from a Class X death world, and we've been trying very hard not to scare you. There was a long pause before Vexlar's crystalline voice responded. Dr. Vasquez, Are you saying that Earth deliberately misrepresented themselves during first contact? Elena considered the question carefully. No, Chief. I'm saying that Earth told you exactly what you were prepared to hear. The full truth about our world and our capabilities would have terrified you. It still will. But circumstances have forced our hand, and now we need to have a very different conversation about humanity's place in the galactic community. As Elena submitted to the security team's restraints, she reflected on how quickly her carefully planned mission had unraveled. She had been sent to gather intelligence while maintaining humanity's peaceful facade, but the galaxy's own suspicions and surveillance capabilities had made that impossible. Now the truth was coming out, and Elena wasn't sure whether that would be humanity's salvation or the beginning of an interstellar conflict that no one was prepared to handle. The sensors had detected the truth about her nature from the very beginning. They just hadn't known how to interpret what they were finding until she had been forced to act like what she really was. A human from Earth, shaped by a world that had turned survival into an art form. And now the galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The containment cell was designed for the galaxy's most dangerous criminals, but Elena found it oddly comfortable. The artificial gravity was set higher than most species preferred, which felt like home to someone from a high-gravity world. The atmospheric composition included trace gases that her enhanced metabolism could process for extra energy. Most amusing of all, the security measures that were supposed to be intimidating, constant monitoring, restricted movement, isolation from other prisoners, were actually less restrictive than the standard operating conditions she'd experienced during military training on Earth. Elena sat in the center of the cell with perfect posture, hands resting calmly in her lap, while Security Chief Vexlar and his team watched her through reinforced barriers. Her vital signs remained steady despite being imprisoned on an alien space station. Her stress hormones were actually lower now than they had been while maintaining her cover as a peaceful researcher. Vexlar's crystalline form shifted through confused patterns as he reviewed the interrogation protocols. How do you question someone who appears to be completely at ease with capture and confinement? Every psychological pressure technique in the galactic database assumed that the subject would be distressed by imprisonment. Elena looked like she was waiting for room service. Dr. Vasquez, Vexlar began through the intercom system. We've been in communication with the Galactic Council regarding your revelations. They find your claims about Earth's classification difficult to believe. Elena nodded understandingly. That's reasonable. Your entire frame of reference for evolution and civilization development is based on peaceful worlds and gradual advancement. The concept of a death world species achieving spaceflight probably seems impossible. It is impossible, interjected Dr. Kelmore, a xenobiologist who had been brought in to assess Elena's claims. Death world conditions prevent the development of complex civilizations. The environmental pressures that create aggressive survival traits also prevent the cooperation necessary for advanced technology. Elena's smile was patient, but predatory. Dr. Kelmore, with respect, your theories are based on worlds where survival is achievable through individual adaptation. Earth requires cooperation for survival. When everything on your planet can kill you, working together becomes the only viable strategy. She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes fixed on the observation cameras. You want to understand how death world species achieve spaceflight? We don't develop technology despite being aggressive. We develop technology because we're aggressive. Every advancement is a weapon against our environment. Every innovation is a survival tool. We reach space not through peaceful exploration, but because our planet is so dangerous that leaving it became a survival necessity. Dr. Thun, who was observing the interrogation despite his recent traumatic experience, spoke up through the communication system. The genetic modifications we detected, natural evolution, Elena repeated firmly, compressed into a few thousand years by environmental pressures you can't imagine. My ancestors didn't choose to become stronger, faster, and more resilient. They became that way, or they died. The modifications you're seeing are the result of a planet-wide survival contest that's been running for over 1 million years. Vexlar's form shifted to a deeper red spectrum, indicating extreme concern. If what you're saying is true, then humanity has been deceptive about their fundamental nature since first contact. Elena's expression grew more serious. Chief Vexlar, let me ask you something. If your first contact with an unknown species revealed that they were apex predators from a world so dangerous that would kill most galactic citizens within hours, how would you have reacted? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Finally, Dr. Kelmore answered quietly, "We would have considered them a threat. Quarantine protocols would have been implemented." "Exactly," Elena confirmed. "And humanity would have been isolated, studied like dangerous animals, and probably never allowed to join the galactic community. Earth's government chose to present the aspects of our world and our nature that you could accept, while gradually introducing you to our true capabilities as you became ready to handle them." Vexlar's patterns shifted to skeptical orange. "You're saying this was all a carefully orchestrated plan?" "I'm saying that Earth's diplomatic corps isn't stupid," Elena replied bluntly. "They knew that the galaxy operates on peaceful assumptions, and that revealing our true nature immediately would have resulted in hostility or isolation. The plan was to integrate slowly, demonstrate our peaceful intentions, and gradually reveal our capabilities as trust developed." Dr. Chantel's voice joined the conversation, transmitted from the medical bay where she was being treated for shock. "But you've been studying us, learning our weaknesses, gathering intelligence." Elena felt a pang of genuine regret. Of all her colleagues, Chantel's sense of betrayal hurt the most. "Yes," she admitted, "I have been, but not for conquest or aggression. Earth needed to understand whether this galactic community could ever pose a threat to humanity, and whether humanity could safely integrate without causing fear or conflict." "And what have you concluded?" Vexlar asked. Elena was quiet for several seconds, organizing her thoughts. "I've concluded that this galaxy has been peaceful for so long that you've forgotten what violence looks like. Your security systems couldn't detect a threat until it demonstrated capabilities beyond your experience. Your emergency response protocols are designed for accidents, not attacks. Your military forces, such as they are trained for peacekeeping rather than warfare." She stood and began pacing the small cell, her movements fluid despite the constraints. "Most importantly, I've concluded that you're genuinely good people. You welcome me with kindness and trust. You shared your knowledge freely. You treated me as an equal despite believing I was from a primitive world. That says something remarkable about your characters." Dr. Kelmore's voice carried a note of suspicion. "But you also concluded that we're vulnerable." Elena stopped pacing and looked directly at the camera. "Completely and utterly vulnerable. If humanity wanted to conquer this galaxy, we could do it with a single ship and a dozen soldiers. Your entire civilization is essentially defenseless against anyone with actual combat experience." The statement sent shockwaves through the observation team. Vexlar's crystalline form flashed through rapid warning colors while Dr. Thun's eye stalks swiveled in agitation. Even Elena could hear increased chatter in the corridors outside her cell as word of her assessment spread through the station staff. However, Elena continued, her voice growing warmer. "Humanity has no interest in conquest. We've spent our entire evolution fighting our own world. The last thing we want is to fight anyone else. What we want is exactly what we asked for during first contact: peaceful cooperation, shared knowledge, and the chance to contribute to something greater than ourselves." Dr. Chantel's voice came through the intercom, strained but determined. "How can we believe you? How can we trust anything you say after this deception?" Elena sat back down, her expression growing genuinely sad. "Chantel, I understand your feelings. I've deceived you, and that hurts. But consider this. I've had dozens of opportunities to harm you and your colleagues. I've been alone with each of you in vulnerable situations. I've had access to critical station systems and sensitive information. If humanity's intentions were hostile, why would I reveal our true nature now? Why not continue the deception and gather more intelligence. The question sparked a heated discussion among the observation team. Elena could hear the debate through the intercom as the various scientists and security personnel argued about her motivations and the implications of her revelations. Commander Zoltar, the Chronari emergency specialist, finally spoke up. During the asteroid crisis, you saved lives at considerable risk to yourself. Your actions were those of someone protecting colleagues, not an enemy operative gathering intelligence. Because that's exactly what I was doing, Elena confirmed. Protecting colleagues, people I've come to care about despite the nature of my mission. Vexlar's voice carried new tension. Your mission. You admit you're an intelligence operative. Elena nodded. I'm a former military specialist assigned to assess galactic capabilities and intentions toward humanity. But I'm also a researcher who genuinely enjoys xenobiology. Both things can be true simultaneously. The discussion outside her cell grew more heated as the implications of Elena's dual role became clear. She was both exactly what she claimed to be and something else entirely. The galaxy was struggling to process the concept of someone who could be simultaneously genuine and deceptive. The question now, Elena continued, is what happens next. Earth's government is probably debating whether to recall me, deny my statements, or come clean about humanity's true nature. Your government is probably deciding whether to treat this as a diplomatic incident or a security threat. Both sides are trying to figure out how to proceed without triggering the exact conflict they're trying to avoid. Dr. Thun's analytical mind engaged with the problem. What would you recommend? Elena's answer came without hesitation. Controlled disclosure. Tell the truth, but tell it carefully. Reveal humanity's true nature to those who need to know, but do it in a way that emphasizes our peaceful intentions and our desire for cooperation. Use my presence here as evidence that humans can integrate successfully with galactic society. You're suggesting we use you as a test case, Vexlar observed. I'm suggesting you use me as proof that Death World species aren't automatically dangerous to peaceful civilizations, Elena clarified. Yes, I'm genetically optimized for survival and combat. Yes, I have capabilities that exceed anything in your experience. But I've spent 3 months on this station without harming anyone or threatening your security. I've saved lives, contributed to your research, and formed genuine friendships despite my mission. Dr. Chantel's voice carried a note of hope mixed with uncertainty. You're saying that humans can be trusted despite being what you are. Elena's voice grew gentle. Chantel, I'm saying that what humans are isn't necessarily what you need to fear. Yes, we're dangerous, but we're dangerous in the way that a well-trained doctor is dangerous with a scalpel, potentially lethal, but dedicated to healing rather than harm. The analogy resonated with the medical staff listening to the interrogation. Dr. Kelmore spoke up thoughtfully. The same capabilities that make you formidable in combat also made you effective at rescue operations during our crisis. Exactly, Elena confirmed. Human military training isn't just about fighting. It's about protecting people, solving problems under pressure, and accomplishing impossible missions. The same skills that make us effective soldiers also make us effective peacekeepers, explorers, and emergency responders. Vexlar's crystalline form had shifted to contemplative blue patterns. You're asking us to judge humanity by your actions rather than your capabilities. I'm asking you to consider that capabilities and intentions are different things, Elena replied. Earth didn't hide our abilities because we planned to use them against you. We hid them because we knew you would judge us based on what we could do rather than what we choose to do. The interrogation continued for several more hours as Elena provided detailed information about Earth's true environmental conditions, human evolutionary history, and the technological capabilities that Death World evolution had made possible. The picture she painted was both terrifying and fascinating, a world where life itself was warfare, where cooperation was survival, and where achieving spaceflight had been a desperate escape from planetary conditions that defied imagination. As the session concluded, Elena found herself oddly hopeful. The initial shock and fear were giving way to curiosity and cautious interest. Her colleagues were beginning to see past her deception to the person she actually was, someone who had risked everything to bridge the gap between two very different types of civilization. The real test would come when the Galactic Council received the full report and had to decide how to handle the revelation that one of their newest members was far more dangerous and far more advanced than anyone had suspected. Elena settled back into her comfortable imprisonment and waited to see whether her honesty would lead to acceptance or to the interstellar incident that both species were desperately trying to avoid. The censors had been right all along. The question now was whether the galaxy could handle the truth they had revealed. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened 18 hours after Elena's revelation, with representatives from 47 different worlds participating via quantum communication links. Elena watched the proceedings from her cell through a secure feed, noting how even this crisis response was conducted with the careful politeness and procedural formality that characterized galactic civilization. No one was shouting. No one was demanding immediate military action. No one seemed to consider the possibility that they might need to prepare for war. Elena found their peaceful nature both admirable and deeply concerning. Counselor Thak, a distinguished Altarian whose species specialized in diplomatic protocols, opened the session with characteristic understatement. Esteemed colleagues, we face an unprecedented situation. One of our newest member species appears to have significantly misrepresented their fundamental nature and capabilities during first contact procedures. The holographic displays around the council chamber showed Elena's biological analysis, tactical assessments of her demonstrated capabilities, and comparative studies with other known species. The data painted a picture that challenged every assumption the galaxy held about peaceful evolution and cooperative development. Dr. Volneris, the Galactic Council's chief xenobiologist, addressed the assembly with obvious bewilderment. The genetic modifications present in the human subject are consistent with millions of years of high-pressure evolution compressed into mere thousands of years. Such rapid adaptation is theoretically possible only under conditions of extreme environmental stress. Death world conditions, added Admiral Kextor, one of the few military representatives on the council. His species, the Drakkari, were among the galaxy's most physically imposing, but even they had evolved on a relatively peaceful world by galactic standards. If this human's claims are accurate, Earth's environmental conditions exceed our most dire classifications. Elena watched the debate with professional interest, noting how each species approached the problem through the lens of their own evolutionary history. The diplomatic species focused on the deception and its implications for trust. The analytical species obsessed over the biological impossibilities. The few military-oriented species worried about security threats. None of them seemed to grasp the real issue. Counselors, Elena said, activating her communication link to the chamber. The assembled representatives fell silent, most of them seeing a human for the first time. With your permission, I'd like to address some misconceptions that seem to be guiding this discussion. Counselor Thak's tendrils rippled with uncertainty. Dr. Vasquez, this is highly irregular. Subjects under investigation do not typically address the council directly. Nothing about this situation is typical, Elena replied calmly. And with respect, Counselor, you're not investigating a criminal. You're trying to understand a fundamental difference in how life developed on my world compared to yours. I can help you understand that difference, but only if you're willing to listen to perspectives that don't fit your current framework. After a brief consultation, the council agreed to hear Elena's statement. She took a moment to organize her thoughts, knowing that her next words would determine humanity's relationship with the galactic community for generations to come. Esteemed counselors, you're approaching this situation as if Earth deliberately deceived you about our nature. That's not accurate. Earth provided you with exactly the information you were prepared to receive. The deception wasn't in what we told you. It was in what you assumed about worlds that could produce spacefaring civilizations. Elena stood and began pacing within view of the cameras, her movements controlled but confident. Your entire understanding of evolution and civilization development is based on peaceful worlds where cooperation is advantageous and violence is counterproductive. You've built a model of development that assumes technological advancement requires social stability, which in turn requires peaceful environmental conditions. She paused, meeting the optical sensors of several representatives through the communication link. That model is correct for your experiences, but it's not universal. Earth represents a different evolutionary path, one where cooperation developed not despite environmental violence, but because of it. Dr. Velnaris interjected, but extreme environmental pressures should prevent the formation of complex societies. Competition for resources should make cooperation impossible. Elena's smile was patient, but sharp. Doctor, you're thinking about competition as zero-sum. If I survive, you don't. On Earth, the competition isn't primarily between humans. It's between humans and the planet itself. When your enemy is the environment, cooperation becomes the ultimate survival strategy. She gestured toward the holographic displays showing Earth's geographical data. Look at our planetary conditions. Frequent natural disasters, extreme weather patterns, active volcanism, seismic instability. On Earth, no individual can survive alone. Communities that learned to work together survived. Communities that didn't were eliminated by the next earthquake, hurricane, or volcanic eruption. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Kex Tor spoke first, his gravelly voice carrying new understanding. You're saying that humanity evolved cooperation as a survival mechanism rather than a social preference. Exactly, Elena confirmed. Human cooperation isn't based on trust or mutual benefit, though those developed later. It's based on the fundamental recognition that none of us survives alone. That recognition is built into our genetic structure, our social instincts, and our technological development. Counselor Merithak's diplomatic training engaged with the problem. But if humans are naturally cooperative, why were we concerned about deception and potential threats? Elena's expression grew more serious. Because cooperation within the group doesn't preclude aggression against external threats. Humans learn to work together to fight our environment, but we also learn to fight. When you spend 1,000,000 years at war with your own planet, combat becomes as natural as breathing. She paused to let the statement settle before continuing. The deception, as you call it, was Earth's attempt to present our cooperative nature without triggering your defensive instincts about our combat capabilities. We knew that if we revealed our true environmental history immediately, you would focus on our capacity for violence rather than our desire for peaceful cooperation. Dr. Kelmore, who had been quietly analyzing Elena's statements, spoke up. The biological modifications we detected, they're not technological augmentations, but evolutionary adaptations to extreme survival pressures. Correct, Elena confirmed. What you're seeing in my genetics isn't artificial enhancement. It's natural selection accelerated by environmental conditions that would kill most galactic species within hours. Humans didn't choose to become stronger, faster, and more resilient. We became that way because the alternatives were extinction. The discussion that followed revealed the depth of the galaxy's misunderstanding about environmental extremes. Most council members came from worlds where the greatest natural hazards were seasonal weather variations or occasional geological activity. The concept of a planet where daily survival required constant vigilance, and where natural disasters were routine occurrences was almost incomprehensible to them. Counselors, Elena continued, I'd like to propose a different framework for understanding the situation. Instead of viewing humanity as a deceptive species that misrepresented itself, consider us as a cooperative species that developed under conditions you haven't previously encountered. Our capabilities are the result of our environment, not our intentions. Admiral Kextor leaned forward in his display. But those capabilities do pose potential security concerns. A species with your demonstrated combat abilities could theoretically pose a significant threat to galactic stability. Elena nodded acknowledgement. Admiral, you're absolutely correct. Humans could pose a significant threat. But consider this. I've spent 3 months on a research station with minimal security, surrounded by civilians from species I'd never encountered before. I've had access to critical systems, detailed intelligence about galactic capabilities, and numerous opportunities to cause harm. She gestured toward the displays showing her mission reports. Instead of exploiting those opportunities, I saved lives during a crisis, contributed to collaborative research, and revealed my true nature when maintaining the deception became impossible. My actions demonstrate human intentions more clearly than our capabilities suggest human threats. Dr. Chantel's voice joined the discussion from Harmony Station's medical bay. Council members, I've worked closely with Dr. Vasquez for 3 months. Despite learning about her deception, I can attest to her genuine care for her colleagues and her commitment to peaceful cooperation. Her capabilities may be concerning, but her character is not. The testimonial from Elena's colleague carried significant weight with the council. Other station personnel added their own perspectives, describing Elena's professional conduct, her contributions to their research, and her behavior during the emergency that had first revealed her true nature. Gradually, the tone of the discussion began to shift from concern about deception to curiosity about possibilities. Counselor Merithak posed the critical question. Dr. Vasquez, if the Council were to accept humanity's true nature and capabilities, what would Earth propose for future relations? Elena had been hoping for exactly this question. Counselor, Earth proposes a gradual integration protocol designed to address legitimate security concerns while allowing for meaningful cooperation. We suggest starting with limited exchanges, humans working alongside galactic species under monitored conditions, demonstrating our peaceful intentions through actions rather than words. She activated her personal data pad, displaying a proposal that Earth's diplomatic corps had prepared for exactly this contingency. Earth also offers to share our survival and emergency response technologies with the galactic community. Our Death World adaptations have produced innovations in disaster response, emergency medicine, and crisis management that could benefit all member species. The offer sparked immediate interest from the Council. Worlds that experienced even minor natural hazards could benefit enormously from technologies developed to handle Earth-level disasters. Dr. Velnaris studied the preliminary technical specifications with fascination. These emergency response protocols, they're designed for conditions that exceed our worst-case disaster scenarios. Because our worst-case scenarios are your extinction-level events, Elena replied matter-of-factly. Humans have learned to treat planetary disasters as routine problems requiring systematic solutions. That expertise could be valuable for improving galactic emergency preparedness. Admiral Kextor raised a different concern. What about military applications? Technologies designed for survival on a death world would have obvious combat applications. Elena's response was carefully diplomatic. Admiral, any technology can have military applications. But consider the source. Humans developed these technologies to protect life, not destroy it. Our military doctrine is fundamentally defensive because our primary enemy has always been our environment, not other sentient beings. The discussion continued for several more hours as the Council grappled with the unprecedented situation of integrating a Death World species into their peaceful community. Elena answered questions about human psychology, Earth's environmental conditions, and humanity's long-term goals for galactic integration. Finally, Counselor Merithak called for a preliminary vote. The question before us is whether to continue diplomatic relations with humanity despite their undisclosed capabilities or to implement containment protocols until further assessment can be completed. Elena held her breath as the vote was conducted. The result was closer than she had hoped, but still positive. 31 votes for continued relations, 16 for containment. The Council has decided to continue diplomatic relations with humanity under enhanced monitoring protocols, Merithak announced. Dr. Vasquez will be released to continue her research under supervised conditions, serving as a test case for human integration into galactic society. Elena felt a wave of relief that she carefully didn't allow to show on her face. The decision meant that humanity had passed its first real test, revealing their true nature without triggering defensive isolation. As the council session concluded, Elena received a priority communication from Earth. The message was brief but telling. Well done. Phase 2 authorized. Elena smiled as she realized the implications. Earth's government had been prepared for this revelation all along. Her mission hadn't been to maintain the deception indefinitely, but to manage its eventual dissolution. The real test hadn't been whether she could hide humanity's true nature. It had been whether she could reveal it in a way that led to acceptance rather than rejection. The censors had detected the truth about her from the very beginning. But now, instead of being a liability, that truth had become humanity's greatest diplomatic asset. As Elena prepared to return to her research duties under her new status as the galaxy's first officially recognized Death World researcher, she reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had been worried about being too dangerous for galactic society. Instead, they had discovered a community so peaceful that it desperately needed the kind of protection that Death World species could provide. The galaxy had no idea how much they needed humans, but their censors had been trying to tell them all along. And now, finally, they were ready to listen.